Right, well, why don't we get started? And Al will join us when he can, if he's joining. So the first item is the opportunity for public comment. Doesn't look like there is anyone, so we will move on to staff reports. Are there any staff reports? Don't believe so.
I don't have anything.
Okay, then we'll do approval of minutes. Terry,
I was you.
oh yeah, you were.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I will second. All in favor? Aye. All right, then we don't have any old business, so we will move on to new business, which are the financial statements on page 5. And thank you to whoever did this packet, because it has bookmarks, it's page numbers. It's the little things. It makes it really easy to chair a meeting when I can just switch back to the agenda. That's rolling.
Okay, so I'm gonna share with you the September quarterlies. Just a real quick overview, because usually, as you know, at this point in the year, there's not a lot that is going on, not a lot changed. We don't have a lot of indicators of where we're gonna be in the budget. So I'm just going to turn to the overview pages and go through those. There's Al.
Hi, Al. We're just starting. Jerry's just starting to go through the financial statements. You're muted. We can't hear you. Sorry. Hopefully you can hear us though.
Can you hear us, Al?
Looks like you can.
Here I go. I'm here. I'm gay.
Okay. So starting on the revenue side, no real changes at this point. Revenues, tax collections are pretty consistent with last year. A little bit higher on real estate, motor vehicles running around. And I do have one correction on this statement. So it says collections in motor vehicles are 89% as compared to 77. It's really 80. That 77 should be 80. Conveyance taxes and housing permits pretty much right on budget, right about a quarter of the way through. State support for education, we have not received any indications that there's going to be any changes in the ECS grant. So we had not at this time received the September, October payment yet, but I'm sure that will be coming soon. That sometimes runs a little bit late. A slight change on the pilot grant, not the amount, but on the payment date. We used to get all of the pilot money in September, which was pretty significant. You know, even before we got the select payment, and we get it all right at, you know, in September. Because now we're getting more from the municipal stabilization grant, the select payment, which comes from the reserve, the municipal revenue sharing. They're going to do now a partial payment in November for this year, and then the rest will be in May. So normally the process is going to be, we're going to get it all in May, but this year to give municipalities a chance to adjust their cash flow for the change, because it's a significant change for some of us. They're going to do a partial in November and then the rest in May.
Do we know how big partial is?
Not yet. Not yet. Charge for services, fines and forfeitures, right on budget. Miscellaneous, nice thing here, you can see that our interest income has finally jumped a little bit. We've gotten off of that 0.1%. Right now, the average for July through September is 2.11%. So not huge, but it's certainly better than it was. So our receipts and interest income right now are over 235,000. That's going to be helpful. Moving on to expenditures, no budgetary concerns on the town side at this point. Still pretty early. Daycare fund, I'll go through the other funds now. They do have expenditures in excess of revenues of 20,000. It's usually timing with them. And as you can see, their fund balance has, since COVID and the grants that they receive, they are doing, they've gotten so many grants. I just
That's
can't
really
get
been
over
amazing.
it. It has really helped to beef up that fund and, we, don't worry quite as much about that now with it at $800,000. So that's great. Cafeteria fund, this is going to be one we're going to be watching. Expenditures exceeded revenues. We did increase the fund balance quite a bit last fiscal year. It went up because they got additional grant monies in with the smart funds. That is continuing for a little bit longer, but once the smart funds run out, then we have to keep an eye on that fund and see how much they need. I don't know what the board's going to do yet with that, the cost of food prices and things. So that's one we'll have to keep an eye on.
When is the state funding drying up from that? Because there's still free lunch and that's as long as the state's.
As long as the state has money, basically. So I think they were thinking towards the end of the calendar year. The board did put some additional funds into the cafeteria fund at year end last year, just to help cover so that they could potentially carry the free lunch a little bit longer if the SMART grant ran out sooner than they thought. The recreation program revenues exceeded expenditures by 25,000. I was pleased with that. Things running pretty much according to budget. On the revenue side, the membership fees, we've taken in about 16% versus 25% at this point, but that one always fluctuates depending on what time of the year memberships are renewing. Program fees are already at 31% of budget, and expenditures are all running just slightly below budget. No change in capital non-recurring from budget at this point. Town Aid Road, we received the first half of the Town Aid Road grant. So we have a fund balance of 320,000 at this point. Once we get another 400,000 in, it gives us about 700,000 overall to cover snow removal costs. Debt service, no real change here either. Fund balance did go up because we have the first payment in from the general fund, but that will be drawn down according to the budget as we make our debt service payments. Moving on to the solid waste fund, revenues exceeded expenditures by 150,000. Most of that, it's timing. There will be expenses that are paid down and that will draw down according to budget. Health insurance expenses exceeded revenues for the quarter by 195,000. Recall with this budget, we plan to draw the fund balance down by about 500,000 because it's still significantly over where we need it to be. So I'm not concerned really about this 195 at this point. The other thing is this is the time of the year when we start covering more claims. So everyone has met their deductibles now and we're covering more claims. So this is the time of year where we're going to accumulate more expenditures. Workers' comp, no problem there, running according to budget. Same with the management services fund. The item here that we'll be watching through the year is going to be the energy accounts. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that because all of the agencies, as you know, contribute into this fund. Their budgeted amounts for electricity, for fuel oil, natural gas, but the bills are paid out of this fund. We do have some excess funds there that we've carried from year to year, so that will help offset. So I'm hoping not to have a big spike when we get to this upcoming budget.
Sherry, for that reason, is there any concern, anything we should be doing, given that the opening of the new school has taken longer? Obviously, there's hard costs that Peter and Mansfield Public Schools have absorbed in terms of staffing and all that sort of stuff because of the arrangement. But when it comes to costs that were, anticipated to be, Board of Ed operating costs versus town,
Right.
this comes from the same pool of taxpayers, so I'm just,
Right.
I guess if we needed to start thinking about mid-year, like what do we do, given that we had a huge, change of circumstances?
Right. So what we'll do is, yes, especially for the energy accounts, he's keeping 2 schools open and running and heated, electricity.
Really
in
3, right? Because the new school's
Right.
heated now.
Yeah, there's some.
Yeah,
Expense already.
So all of that, really, we're gonna have to watch and see how that hits. What I did tell the superintendent was that, if I'm gonna look at how we trended for the year versus what we budgeted and what we had sort of in reserve. So if we can soften the blow a little bit, I will. If they have some funds come the end of the year and we can put some money toward that, that's typically what I would recommend. But we'll look at it as we go into budget so that we don't see a huge spike in his budget
Right.
to cover the electrical costs and heating.
So I think you just answered the next question though, because right now those 2 buildings are continuing to operate as schools. Regardless of how we budgeted and based on what set of assumptions we had, i.e. we will open the new school and these 2 buildings will be mothballed and now just town property. Up to this point and continuing on until, we move away from those schools, the operating expenses are continuing to be charged to school accounts. Okay.
Yes,
So even though we changed from a budgeting standpoint, we're still showing the expense where it's actually.
right.
Okay.
Right. Yep. Okay, transit services and the cemetery fund pretty much running according to budget. No real concerns there. Eastern Highland and the downtown partnership. Revenues exceeding expenditures for both of them. I'm not hearing of any concerns from either one of those, so I think we're okay there. Just a couple of notes on this packet. This is the first year we're actually closing in the new Munis system, doing the year-end closing. The rollover for the new year has been a little complicated, and we're having a little trouble opening the new year. There's nothing wrong with the data, but I just keep running into, okay, now it's giving me this error, now it's giving me that error, and trying to just actually close the year. Until we close the year, this system will not allow us to run a new trial balance. So, which is incredibly frustrating.
Do they not have people who are sort of designated to sort of step in and walk us through problems like that, or?
They do. I've been on the line with them a couple of times, and it's just getting the right person to get you through it. They give you one person. I get so far with them and they say, oh, you need to talk to this person. So then we go to that person, and then I get a message back from that person that says, oh, here, this is what you need to do. But that wasn't my problem to begin with.
I understand.
So
Frustrating.
it's been challenging, but we'll get there. I'm not worried about being able to get it done.
Yeah,
It was just the timing. The old system, we could run a trial balance over 2 years. So it would just combine the data and I could get a report. This system will not allow me to run it at all for 23. So you're not seeing the general fund trial balance in here. For all the other funds, they're a little more minor. Their trial balances are much simpler. So we were able to basically manually calculate their balance sheets. And that's what we did.
that's frustrating.
Yes.
If it continues to be a problem, it's just because it was such a major purchase. Can we sort of demand that they send somebody here, or?
Yeah, we'll we'll do something with them. For sure. I did actually get it to work once on the test side, and every time I try now, I'm running into troubles, but yeah, we'll get there. I'm just looking to see if there's anything else I wanted to point out.
So when it says not available at this time, in the report, that's why.
Yes, yep. A little heads up on the, as long as I have some information on it, I'll share it. The Anthem claims on page 32 of the packet. Just pointing out that last fiscal year, our claims went up 18.7%. So we have gotten some preliminary estimates in from Anthem for the upcoming year. And so we're looking at a rate increase. This is without all of our administrative costs of about 13%. Now, I'm not sure, given the size of our fund balance, how we'll actually smooth that out. But I just wanted to point out that last year, our claims support that sort of an increase from them. So when they came back and said, yeah, we're looking at 13% in your rates, it didn't surprise me because we had claims up 18% last year. And so we'll work again to try to smooth that out as best we can.
Do we have any sense of why we had that jump?
All the claims jumping.
I haven't looked at the claims data myself, but I think there's some pent up demand from things being pushed off during COVID.
That makes sense, yeah.
And plus we're still, seeing a lot of COVID claims, a lot of people sick, a lot of people, we found after COVID, once everybody started taking their masks off, there were a lot of claims. The doctor's offices were overrun with people getting things. So, but that's just anecdotal. I think that's all I really wanted to point out on the quarterlies. Oh, one more thing. The detail of debt on the summary of debt on page 50 and 51, these schedules have not been updated yet. So I just wanted to make you aware, I need to update these for the end of fiscal year 22. There was some debt issued in early June, I believe. So I just need to pull that data out so that I can get these schedules updated for you.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes.
In talking with other town officials from other towns, everybody's really worried about the impact of inflation. And I know you said you were watching the energy, but are you seeing any real impact of inflation? And is it something we should worry about?
Other than the energy, certainly for food services, they're, watching that carefully and doing what they can to keep their food prices down. But I'm not seeing, at least yet, any real significant variations from budget. So I think we're going to be okay in most instances.
I think asphalt hurt us this year. And
Probably.
And
That would make
cost
sense.
of treated salt is considerably higher.
Yeah.
So some DPW major cost centers.
That makes sense. With the asphalt, you just do less roads, right?
Right, so
But with the salt,
You kind of got to do.
you have to do what you have to do.
The salt isn't bought already. It's yet to be bought.
Well, we keep, John, I'll tell you how many, I think we might have like 5 storms worth of salt in our garage right now. So we do stock up, and we did stock up, before the pricing maybe got a little worse. We ended last season, I think, pretty well. So, but yeah, it all goes that we're on a.
It's not for the whole season.
It's a group contract. Yeah. So we basically aim to always have at least 3 events worth in the garage. So some towns do unfortunately end up without any salt.
That's all I have on the quarterlies unless there's any other questions.
Any questions?
I don't have any.
I got one. I got a couple anyway.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm a health insurance fund. I see that there's a negative $200 in the employee wellness program. But payment in lieu of insurance is halfway. But we've expended half the budget at the quarter mark, and I'm just wondering about those two.
Yep. Definitely, so the payment in lieu of, that is really just town. We're the only ones who do that. The school boards don't do it, and it's paid twice a year.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
it should be at 50%.
Okay. Pay twice, okay.
And the $200 negative, see if I can find that. Employee wellness, that is probably a reversal of an accrual from year end. That happens occasionally in September.
Yeah.
They reverse the entry before the bill comes in.
Okay, and then the bills are gonna start eventually coming in at some point.
Yep.
Yeah, that's what I figured that. Okay, thank you. Let's see. Let's see. On the cafeteria fund, there's no budget available like at this time. Is there? I'm trying to remember why that is.
Yeah. They had a changeover in their director as well. So I think they're working on trying to revise the budget.
Okay,
Changes in the program. We could have used the original budget, but I don't think it's going to be super accurate at this point. So
Okay.
what we're trying to do is get a more accurate budget.
makes sense to me. And on the daycare fund, excuse me, I'm sorry. We've used over 100% of the insurance, and then I'm sure there's going to be more, or is that just sort of, okay, we paid for the year?
We paid for the year there.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Cool. Any other questions from anybody? I don't have any. If not, then we can move to recommend the approval of the financial statements to the town council.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Any discussion or debate?
Nope.
Seeing none. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Okay. Thank you. That'll be on our agenda. I think it's on the consent agenda of the next meeting. All right, so let's move on to the shared services discussion. And we have a little bit of time for it, so I will let Ryan and Sherry present what they have been thinking about and working on.
That's fine. So as the agenda item summary says, I want to start off this discussion by just emphasizing that certainly from a staff standpoint, there's a shared recognition and appreciation for the fact that we've had, I don't know how many years it's been. Sherry would probably be able to quote exactly how many years.
30-ish.
A longstanding relationship amongst the various entities that, especially the big three, as we call them, the town, Mansfield Public Schools, and Region 19 for a constellation of services that are shared. And I know that over the course of the past, I've been here 2 years and I've been through 2 budget cycles. And so certainly speaking from my own observations, concerns have emerged in my mind, and I think are shared by many others, using the budget as an example and the development of the budget, that there's an awful lot of work that has to get done, and an awful lot of work that has to get done in a certain sequence that essentially, while we might quote unquote start, just for the town now, kick off our annual budget process in December. And department heads take the guidance and the parameters that I provide, and they do their part, and they turn around their initial budget requests and they meet on it. There's basically this lull that happens, and this lull is largely driven by the fact that finance is buried with work that has to be done at the front end for Mansfield Public Schools, and then Region 19, and then by the time the town manager presents his or her budget recommendations to the town council, based on the very tail end of March, those that haven't been involved in the process would think, well, been this slow buildup. You've had 4 or 5 months to kind of, use different assumptions and toy with numbers and kind of refine. And the reality is, that was actually my reality when I was in Enfield, New Hampshire, some variation of that. The budget season was a very methodical, was a marathon, not a sprint. But while we might have a marathon on the calendar, what's been happening is it is absolutely a sprint, because a lot of the key work that quote unquote management has to do, it's bottom line driven. So if I have a department head looking for confirmation that I fully support X or Y or Z, it's this really kind of qualified support that I'm giving because I haven't seen a bottom line yet. There's big unknowns still out there. And so my first time through the budget, I wasn't necessarily aware, hadn't talked at length with Kelly Lyman, who's still the superintendent at the time, what her process looked like. I assumed, and suffice it to say it was a wrong assumption, but I'd assumed that being the first in line, I kind of looked over there with envy. Oh, must be nice to be Mansfield Public Schools. Finance is going to make sure they're in ship shape before they think about Region 19, before they think about the town. And without going into gory details, that the grass wasn't necessarily as green on the other side as I thought. There were definitely things that Kelly was very concerned about and frustrated about, and felt that through nobody's intentional withholding of quality support, that the support wasn't there, especially at the end. I think they would kind of get to a point of near doneness, and it's like starting to pivot to Region 19, and she's like, no, wait, there's still more, please, I'm not quite there yet. So this is not the only pain point. I want to invite Sherry to jump in here too, but suffice it to say, we've talked a fair amount about this, and again, we've been through 2 of these, and we get there, we get a quality budget at the end, but it's really this like, are we gonna make it kind of feel, that's just no way to live, especially when there's just so much going on, and you really want this to be a very careful, methodical analysis, so that the best decisions at a staff level and then ultimately by the council can be made. And so we start talking about, well, what might we do to improve upon that? And not just, make it better for the town at the expense of everybody else, but is there actually a solution that could be better for everybody? And so, this is, some of these conversations, Sherry had started, as you all know, in this role that I installed her to be a mentor and kind of oversight when Charmaine was still here. And so, Sherry and I were having these conversations before she basically took over as acting director, but they certainly continued on. And so one of the, I won't say conclusions we reached, but certainly one of the things we were contemplating was, when you look at everything that's to get done and the entities and how everything kind of fits together, it seems like if you were going to make a case that there was one entity that kind of was least like the others, or kind of could be set aside, at least when it comes to, again, finance specifically in shared services and the level of support, it would be Region 19. And so we talked about that. We talked about the timeline. We talked about the supports. And so I asked Sharon Quinner, the superintendent, to have a conversation, very much exploratory, not saying this is what it is, not saying we're not agreeing to a successor agreement that looks like the last few. Just let's be honest with each other. What are your pain points? Because I hadn't talked with her a ton about it. So I was curious. Are you totally over the moon, happy, like everything's perfect? Are you somewhere in between, maybe where Kelly and I and Peter and I are in terms of level of frustration? And I don't want to necessarily speak for her, but I'll say it lied somewhere in between. She has her concerns, but maybe wasn't feeling it the same way that I was. And so we talked about, though, again, not to leave anybody out in the cold, she was curious to know, okay, just to kind of go along with this discussion, what from a budgetary standpoint, what does Region 19 contribute towards the staffing? So if she did kind of go her own path with like a school business administrator, somebody who's dedicated to her accounting and her budget, what kind of dollars would she have to work with? And so we worked up those numbers and we shared them with her, again, just for conversation purposes. And that's basically where things are. So we've disclosed, I've disclosed to her concerns that I have about the sustainability of the model, certainly under current staffing. This is not the only option that's out there. I'm not saying that it's this or the status quo and there's nothing in between. But I do feel like I need to be very candid with the council that, surviving the budget, and again, using that as an example, there are other things, other, deadlines that are where it's a scramble. But I think this is where it's kind of most focus, most lights cast on it. I really feel like it's the current, we're not in equilibrium, and part of that is people and staffing, and this is where I'll turn to Sherry, because I think Sherry was a big proponent, champion of this for a lot of years. I think it worked. I also think that Sherry Trahan is something of a superhuman in the sense that, just always did whatever it kind of took. And not to say that, we are a victim of Sherry's success, but in some ways, if you have somebody who's kind of always willing, no matter what the hour, what the day, to just kind of find a way and set your own life aside and make it happen, it kind of masks some of the challenges. And so I guess what I'm saying is looking forward and imagining some, future, leadership team, as it were, in finance. Certainly it's going to be my goal to set out to find the best of the best, and some really, capable individual to lead that department, and good things come from that. But I'm certainly not convinced that, that alone is going to change things and bring us back to these happier times that everybody seems to remember, when Sherry was the finance director. So I'll stop there, but Sherry, I want to let you, I'm sure you have questions, but I'll stop there. I want to give Sherry a chance, again, as somebody who lived in this ecosystem, was a proponent of it. I think you'll probably take more away from Sherry's take on it as somebody who's a big supporter of the current arrangements.
Yeah, I'll say I struggled for a while with saying, oh, this doesn't work, or we can't make this work. And I had to look at it long and hard. I had to spend some real long hours in there, over this past, couple of years. It's been 2 years now, and I've still been working part-time to see what's been happening in the office. And it's not just the person in that top seat. It's the whole office and what happens in there and how you recruit. So one of the things we lost 2 accounting managers during this period of time. It's a significant workload on that position, along with managing the accounting department that manages the accounts payable and the payroll. And we thought we had a couple of good people in there, that could do it, but it was overwhelming for both of them. And so the first one was right when she was new, and it was right when COVID hit. So that was a complete blowing everything out of the water. But that position is very, very key. We still have not been able to get any significant group of applicants that we can look at to fill that position. And that's a key position, because that's the one that does all the financial statements, keeps the payroll going, accounts payable, keeps those functions going, but really does these financial statements and handles the entire audit. And the audit itself for, 3 entities is huge. The other thing, so that was the first thing that really had me thinking, okay, if this is too much, if we can't keep that position filled, the director can't function. And so you can't do it all. So that was the first thing. And then there's just so much. I could just go on for days. So the other thing is timing. There's so much in this department when it comes to the audit, payroll, accounts payable, getting W-2s out, getting 1099s out, doing the audit, doing the 3 budgets, that if you don't keep up with that, and we threw in a system conversion in there, if you're not really staying on top of that, you can't possibly get through budget. So if you don't have the audit basically done and out of the way so that you can move forward with budget, you're not going to make it. And there would be extensions. There were far more extensions than I think there ever should have been. There are a lot of reasons for that, but that's what's telling me that it's not just the person, it's also the workload. When you can't find people to fill the position, and it's a fairly high paying salary, and we can't find anybody with the
It's the person who has to be an accountant.
right, yeah, especially for the accounting manager. One of the reasons we looked at, or we talked about Region 19 also, is that Mansfield Board of Ed is really a department of the town. So while they have their own Fed ID number for purposes of reporting payroll, they have their own governing body, they're still part of the town. The region isn't. So if we can separate off a portion of the region work, it makes more sense because they're their own reporting entity. So when we do a comprehensive annual financial report, the town and the board are combined, the region is its own. So that would eliminate one entire audit report if the school district had their own school business manager. The other thing I gave thought to was that there's not a ton of communities in the state that have shared services, but many of them that do have two separate chief financial officers. So they'll have a director of finance for the town, and they'll have a school business manager for their board of education. I don't think we need that within this organization, within the town board, but I think it would answer a lot of the concerns that we're having if we were to pull the region off in that direction.
Having their own accountant / business manager in-house.
Right. So they right now have a financial person. She's half financial, half payroll. It's kind of what this position does, which is good for a lot of the basic day-to-day stuff. But you really need that higher level, the school business manager, the one who can do, and this is where all the duplication of work comes. When we come down to doing the EFS, which is the educational financial system, we're doing two of them. Those are huge reportings that take a significant amount of time. We're trying to do that for September 1st. So trying to get the auditors in July, August, get them going, keep up with all of them, close the fiscal year for all three entities, get all your year-end transfers done, and do the EFS reporting for the school boards for September 1st is an incredible challenge. If we were to pull one of those off, it would make a huge difference. When I looked at the shared service agreement, because I think we would lose out if we pulled the region out, or the board, either one, out completely. I think you lose a lot of the benefit of the shared services. Things that have really made us successful in managing our budgets, like the Management Services Fund, doing our energy contracts together, things like that. So what I looked at was if we could pull off certain things, certain functions that a school business manager would do.
We're still talking Region 19
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, I just don't. It just makes much more sense to me than to do the town's school board. Where was I going with that? So looking at the functions and said, okay, what functions would it make sense, and where do we really need the relief in the finance department? So that crucial position, the accounting manager position, the one we're having trouble keeping filled. Certainly the finance director, who is trying to attend all meetings for everyone and know everything about every entity, would be a huge help. The budget piece. So our budget folks are beyond Barry trying to do salary budgeting. And as you know, school boards, it's mostly staffing. Their budgets are 90%, 80, roughly 85% staffing costs. So that is all done by the finance department. If we pull one school district out of that, that's going to give relief to the budget people. So there's your budget, your financial reporting, the EFS reporting, that streamlines that whole section. We'd still be able to keep all the accounts payable processing and the payroll processing. And that's where you really achieve savings because you're doing bulk stuff. So, you know, I mean, that's when I drafted what I think you have in your packet, the changes to the agreement, just to see what it would look like, and then just a summary page to see how it would kind of shake out.
So in terms of the sort of intangibles that we get from having a shared services agreement, I think there's a feeling on the council, at least, and maybe it's felt in the same way, but in a not as in a positive light by folks on some of the school boards, that by having you, the finance director, be the finance director for all three, that we don't, what we end up not getting is like a runaway board budget, right? Where the town gets a presentation from one of the two school boards of a budget that calls for a dramatic increase in school services when the town can't, the council doesn't think the town could afford that, and maybe the taxpayers would revolt over it. And so what we've had, for better or for worse, over the years is school budgets that have come in pretty flat without a significant expansion, but you know, because this, basically the number of students has gone down, they've been able to do more. And so is that a thing, right? Is there a truth to that? Or as the finance director who's serving three masters, are you really trying to keep yourself completely independent through all three processes?
So, and this goes back to my predecessor who always looked at it, and he said, the thing that you need to keep in mind all the time is that it's the same taxpayers for all three. So supporting them appropriately, but looking at the big picture. So that's one of the things we did for a number of years before we kicked off any budget. It would be myself, the town manager, and the two superintendents would meet and go over what I thought the budget was going to look like for the upcoming year.
And,
So-
and your proposal isn't changing that role, right? I mean, so this new person would just be moving, so you've got the person in-house who's doing all three. It's having them have their own person for the accounting aspect of it, the auditing
Yes,
aspect of it.
yes.
But as you're envisioning this, the finance director would still have the role of going to meetings, or no?
No,
Okay.
not
This
really.
is,
That person would actually be their
Mhm.
finance director.
Right.
and would not report to you in any way.
Right. So I think, but that's a key point, I think, because, well, having worked so many years under the region as well, usually Mansfield was one of the more understanding partners out of the 3-member towns, that the others, smaller towns face significant challenges as well. So they were always had a good interest in maintaining their budgets, and I don't think that's changed. But I think the important thing is still maintaining at a management level that relationship between the town manager, the two superintendents, and I would see going forward, this would be the school business manager and the director of finance, and say, okay, this is what we look at as we're going into a budget. Is it a reval year? What's happening, you know, with inflation? What is happening, you know, with home sales, you know,
What
all of
capital
that.
projects do you have on the horizon?
Exactly. I mean, we'd sit down and say, okay, you know, all right, wait a minute, they're doing their roof this year. We don't want to do our roof at the same time we do it next year. And I think that's still really valuable. And that's why I wouldn't pull it all apart completely. I'd try to keep those bigger functions.
But technically, and perhaps like if under the current system, you're the same person. And so you would have that meeting, that anybody who's the director of finance would have that meeting. The board of the region could decide to do something else now
Mhm,
and do something else, and it could pass referendum. And the town would, unlike the district, would have no ability, either any of the three towns, as long as it passed referendum, couldn't change it. And so I guess there's been a thought that that meeting in your sort of role serving all three taxpayers, the same taxpayers, has been one of the things that's kind of kept us from getting into a
Mhm.
situation where there could be conflict between us and any of the other towns and the region. That's not true in every community. And we
For
really
sure.
like the fact that we don't have boards that fight with each other and with us.
mhm.
And so I guess the concern that I have of completely removing their budget process from the greater budget process is maybe not next year, maybe not in a few years, but at some point you could have a superintendent who wants to do things differently, a principal that want to do things differently, and a supportive board who looks at how regional budgets get made and says, well, geez,
Mhm.
all we have to do is get 100 votes at a referendum and we can do whatever the hell we want. We don't have to listen to these guys over in Mansfield telling us they don't want to raise their taxes, or in Wellington or Ashford. Like, all we have to do is get a referendum passed. And it looks like only 85 people vote every year in them. So let's give it a shot. And without that kind of staff level input, you're kind of left,
Mhm.
Heard the phone, figured you're out there.
Well,
Right.
I heard.
you're kind of left hanging a little bit, or you could be. And so I guess I don't want to lose that cohesion. And
Mhm.
I agree with the efficiency piece a lot.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering if there's a way we could do the efficiency piece while maintaining.
It's possible. I think it's a good question. I mean, technically, yes, I serve as their school business manager, director of finance, but if their superintendent really wanted to do something else and their board really wanted to do something
Right.
else,
There's nothing to stop.
I'm probably not going to be able to get anywhere. And that's kind of what I think happens with a little peer pressure, is when we're all meeting together to provide the best for our community, that there's some peer pressure there.
And that meeting would still happen.
I
There's no
would
reason,
highly
yeah, stop
recommend
that
that.
meeting, but
Yeah.
the fact that it's the smaller towns are always saying, please don't raise our taxes.
Right.
Keeps things in check. And of course, the democratic process would keep things in check, in the sense that if the school board were to go amok, it's not going to be you that keeps them in check. It would be the
Right.
people who wouldn't vote them in again.
But I do think it's something that we could look at. Just to see how, okay, if there's a piece that, and I know there are some shared services that do this as well, where the finance director is actually over the school business manager. So we'd have to think that through, talk that through with the region. I don't know if they would go for that. And maybe it's only on certain things.
Well, and that's kind of my other question is you've described some of the things that Sharon might appreciate about this theoretically, like
Mhm.
having someone by her side, working next to her in her office, which is not in this building,
Right.
doing the budget, answering budget questions, whatever, instead of her having to wait for you to get there, or, whatever, she can just sort of go next
Right.
door. I'm guessing that there's some similar pressures for Peter, but that there's some of them are alleviated because you guys are all right here.
Mhm.
But maybe if there's growth that needs to happen in terms of how many people we have working or what the workload is on the existing people, you could be in a position where there could be sort of two school business people whose jobs it is to manage the budgets of both of the entities, but that they have some other connection to the finance department that would give the
Mhm.
superintendents, day-to-day supervision, but they're part of our structure. I don't know how it might work exactly, but it might maintain the finance director's role as
Mhm.
the person sort of setting guidance and building budgets and might help keep that piece of the efficiency.
How
that
about
we
the
get.
issue of the person having to be at all of these meetings all the time? Are we just gonna burn through finance directors if, if,
Right, well, maybe they wouldn't have to be at every
Mm.
meeting then, if
I
there's
mean,
a
that's just.
under
I mean,
person who can manage the committee.
Right. There's some possibility here. I mean, if you were to consider, and the only concern I think I'd have that we might even get pushback from some folks is, suppose we were to hire another person in the shared service department that served, just like we have an accounting manager that manages those functions, but we hire a school business manager per se that is going to deal with either one or both of the boards. That's more of that secondary person on the same level as the accounting manager. But that person would maybe, and maybe the easiest way to do it would be to locate that person at the region. So it might not support the board, it might only support Region 19. My only concern is that we're hiring one person specifically to support one entity. And if the agreement or the shared services were to fall through, now we have a town employee that we have to work with. So, but let me give it a little more thought. Maybe there's another way to.
Could there
Work
be
out.
a need for there to be a school business administrator whose job it was to do the budgets for the most part, and this
Mhm.
reporting that happens and
Support.
whatever for both boards, such that they
Well, I
could,
think, so I mean, mindful of the time, we got transitioned to
Yeah, I
the
know.
full meeting, but I think, the purpose for tonight, there's no motions to be
Mhm.
made. The recommendations from staff is just, we'd like council support just to continue thinking this through.
It's obviously a problem.
And,
Yeah,
for various reasons, some of these internal staff to staff, conversations kind of exited that realm and kind of got governing body folks involved. And so just knowing that there's some of that out there, we just figure, okay, well, now we should come to the council and
Mhm.
kind of bring everybody up to speed on what has the discussion been, to date. And so just basically wanted to do that. So, I think a number of, possibilities, additional things for us to explore have come out of this, and we just want to have open lines of communication from this point forward.
Yeah, 'cause
I've
it-
been both on school boards and participated in CABE and on the council and participated in CCM. So the worst things that happen in towns is when boards of ed and councils are at arms are at war with one another because the budgets weren't approved or they didn't like what was in the budget and they didn't know what was in the budget. It can really screw up a town badly.
Mhm.
And that's the one thing that our system has really
Mhm.
dealt with and very successfully. And I would hate to see anything along those lines develop here. One of the things that concerns me about this most recent dust up, aside from the mechanics of finance, is that we haven't had the kind of collaboration with the board over there that we have with our own board on a regular basis.
Mhm.
And I really worry about that divisiveness building. So I'm hoping we can do whatever is necessary to meet everybody's needs, but in a way that still is cohesive.
Mhm.
yeah, and I think, from my perspective, we would, whatever we do, I think we want the region to want to do it too, right? I think we need.
Yeah,
to-
no, obviously, whether you can do something a certain way, preferably, like I said at the front end, the goal wasn't to solve a problem we have at the expense of everybody else, but to hopefully collectively, by consensus, find something that works better for everybody.
Yeah, And I'll just say that, I mean, I've invested so much in this program for so many years that I will continue to work to make sure that it stays functioning as best it can and works well for everybody, because I do,
Yeah.
it was hard for me saying, okay, you want to what? No, you can't take it apart.
In terms of like finance director meeting, I know whenever Al joined the committee, we tried to move this meeting to a night that Al could spend, we could have longer meetings, right? Because Al can't get here before 6. And what we basically, I can't remember if it was you or Charmaine who was here then, but what we basically figured out was there's literally like no other night that the finance director doesn't have another meeting. And so at the very least coming up with some kind of way as we think about future finance director, like recruitment, to not tell someone, yeah, basically you've got, especially in budget season, like you've got a meeting every night of the week for 3 months or close
Well,
to it.
It's challenging, but I wouldn't say there's no other night. I'm just throw that out there.
Okay,
Good work on that.
Yeah.
Saturday night.
Yeah, Sunday midday works. good.
Okay, well, we've got to get out of here. Al, do you have anything else?
No, I think that this is a good starting point. I mean, we have to start somewhere. And we gotta, to figure this out. I understand completely the desire to separate out and, to the school. But I understand the other side too. And the more we talk, the more I think we'll get something that everybody can agree to. I've heard, some good ideas here. Let's keep digging. We'll get there.
I
Thanks,
think
Al.
so too.
Okay, is
Your motion or your second's about to walk out the
Motion
door.
to
Terry moves to adjourn. We don't have any communications, other business or future agendas. And Al, do you second?
Second.
All in favor, we are adjourned.
Ready?
Hey, see you soon.